Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, and welcome to this edition of the Anchor Man. I am, of course, your Anchor Man, Chris Ano, coming to you from the great state of Texas, precisely here in Houston. Houston, Texas. Is always a privilege to come into your homes with news from Africa, from Egypt from Cairo to the Capes in South Africa and all of Europe, the continental USA, South America. Ladies and gentlemen, once more, good evening and welcome. This is going to be very, very exciting for those of you who are tuning in by way of the social media, Facebook, Please, I would love you to go ahead and hit your share button and let us quickly, in a matter of minutes, 5 minutes, ladies and gentlemen, have at least 1,000 people tuning in to be part of this broadcast on the social media. For those of you who are joining from all across Africa, thank you. Thank you for tuning in. We're going to be discussing tonight a subject which I consider very, very critical, very, very important for as long as the war in the Cameroons is concerned. Talking about the country formerly known as La République du Cameroon and what is now known today as Ambazonia, the Federal Republic of Ambazonia, the former British Southern Cameroons. A week ago, the U.S. government granted the temporary protected status to immigrants, undocumented immigrants coming from the Cameroons in the USA as a result of the war that is ongoing in the two Cameroons. And yesterday we learned that La République du Cameroon has signed a military pact with Russia. Russia is, as you all know, is in the midst of war with Ukraine. But in the midst of that, Russia is signing a military pact with La République du Cameroon. This show is intended to bring to you what is in all of this. What does it mean as far as the war for the actualization, the restoration of the independence of the Southern Cameroons is concerned? Ambassador Tibor Nagy is here with me and will be weighing in with his expert opinion on these subjects. So ladies and gentlemen, please, for those of you again joining in by way of Facebook, go ahead and quickly hit your share button. Quickly hit your share button so that I can delve into this in less than no time. So please, if you are joining by way of Facebook, hit the share button. So in the next 5 minutes, let's have at least 1,000 people saturating the platform, the social media platform. Again, I will be joined in this broadcast by Ambassador Tibor Nagy, former U.S. Undersecretary for Africa under President Trump. And he will be weighing in with the politics that we see going on between La République du Cameroon and the Russian Federation, even when they are engulfed in the huge war that they probably miscalculated. They are signing military alliances, this time with La République du Cameroon. Do not forget, they were just in Mali where they helped the Malians overthrow their government to the chagrin of the French. And now they are going after another French colony, this time La République du Cameroon. How are the French looking at this? How are they taking this? Ladies and gentlemen, we will weigh on to this. But also today, we're going to be talking about a special trip I have read in the front pages of the newspapers in the Cameroon, and it is all about all routes heading to Indian County, with Colonial Prime Minister Dion Ngute heading over there with a delegation, we are told, to get the IDPs back home and to discuss development and employment to the people of India. And the question many people asking is, where have they been for 60 years? For 60 years. How come they're thinking of Indian only today? Could this be because of Iya Marianta becoming the president of the interim government of Amazonia? Do not forget, Iya Marianta hails from India, just as Colonial Prime Minister Dion Ngute equally hails from India. We're going to be talking about that later in the show. Also, we do not forget, Samuel Ekomesako is out again with another drive when Amazonian Southern Cameroonians are asking who is actually auditing him for the past two drives of 2020, 2021. Now he talks of 2022 when everybody is demanding an audit for the past two drives. We're going to be talking about that. Lastly, John Frundi is in the news, ladies and gentlemen. John Frundi was on CRTV, Cameroon Radio and Television, preferring a solution to the conflict, the war that is ongoing for the past 5 years and counting. He was asked by the anchor what the solution to the conflict should be, and Frundi suggested that all Amazonian diaspora leaders should be arrested and extradited to La République du Cameroon to face their law. We're going to be talking about this, ladies and gentlemen. Please go ahead, hit your share button, as I come to you with this presentation. I'm going to come to you first with my monologue, and after I come to you with my monologue, I will then bring in Ambassador Nagy, who is joining me from the great state of Pennsylvania. He's actually on the road. So I will bring you my monologue, my talking point, and after the talking point, I will then present, I will then bring to you Ambassador Tibor into the discussion. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, I will now take you into this monologue. And this is very, very important. This monologue, again, has to do with the events happening in the past few weeks between the USA granting Cameroonians the TPS status and Russia signing a deal with La République du Cameroon. Until a week ago, when the US granted TPS to undocumented Cameroonians already living in the country due to the ongoing war, the war situation in the southern Cameroons, Yaoundé had crafted a recurring message. A message they hope the world, at least those who care, would listen to and believe them. The message echoing from Yaoundé since January through AFCON, the African Cup of Nations, till this moment is that the war is over. The message is that only a few pockets of resistance are left. The message is that total peace is finally in the horizon. Life, they want people to believe, is beginning to pick up back. Yaoundé has only fallen short of declaring full victory, something that Paul Atanganji attempted before. But wake up to realize that Amazonian fighters are still very much in the business of freeing their country, their territory. Perhaps this is the reason why this time they are being a little bit cautious. But this is what has been behind recent optimism in Yaoundé. Yaoundé was recently behind two meetings in the diaspora. Both aim at consolidating the return to peace on the ground. The first one in Washington, D.C., and the other one in Switzerland. In Washington, D.C., barely 2 weeks ago, using as proxy the American Peace Institute, Cameroon brought members of the Ambazonia coalition team together in a full-week seminar, hoping to surreptitiously persuade Ambazonia coalition team toward the ultimate end would be the return of peace to Cameroon. While the U.S. Peace Institute was hosting ARC, Southern Cameroon's chiefs, led by the Fon of Akum, were descending on Paris for a mission many are still to understand the raison d'etre, other than the conclusion that this was another effort, another ploy by the French government to coerce the chiefs to return home and preach peace and cohabitation with La République du Cameroon. The trip to Paris still remains shrouded in secrecy, but Ambazonians see a conspiracy in it, and they may well be right. The timing was very suspicious. While the chiefs were having a field day in Paris with French officials, and surely over some French wine too, another meeting was covertly holding in Switzerland, like the one in Washington, D.C. The one in Switzerland was being hosted by the Swiss Peace Organization. Agbobala was head of the delegation from Ground Zero that consisted of some members of the clergy, newspaper publishers, some fighters, as I was made to understand. Not really sure which fighters they were. And we are told other leaders of civil society back home were also part of that meeting in Switzerland. The Swiss meeting, we have learned, was meant to serve the delegation with some capacity building experience, building capacity for peace. These groups from Ground Zero, Swiss Peace considered them as partners and stakeholders in the struggle. But let me tell you why this backgrounding is important. Last week, I spoke to a very dependable source in the corridors of power in Yaoundé, and he stated that Yaoundé doesn't care. It doesn't care about Swiss urgency and Swiss mediation. Yaoundé is vehemently opposed to any negotiations in which the Swiss government and the Swiss NGO HD Humanitarian Dialogue will be part of. In the place of the Swiss HD and mediation, Cameroon is saying that Swiss Peace and the American Peace Institute can do a better job. That's who they prefer. But guess why these two are being touted as capable of a better job in Cameroon's judgment? Because they are all about peace. Peace without justice to the wrongs that have been done to the people of the southern Cameroons. They are all about living together in one and indivisible Cameroon. The meeting in Switzerland was about preparing Agbobala and those he led there for peace building on the ground. That of DC was a little bit intriguing, but ultimately it was about peace building too. Cameroon is so excited with the Two Peace Institute. It is vouching mainly their services for anything having to do with negotiations with the separatists, as they call it. Ambazonians should remain very, very watchful of the type of role these two peace institutes are playing towards ending the war. Independence is off their agenda. From these meetings, one can therefore understand the salivation on the faces of Ambazonia blacklegs, as they call it, meeting with Dion Ngute in Yaoundé last week. In their minds, they apparently thought the world has forgotten about Ambazonia, thanks to the war in Ukraine. They were mistaken. The salivation has been short-lived. America has sent them a strong message. A message that is obviously reversing their envisaged fortunes and their gains in granting temporary protection status to citizens of both Cameroons seeking to stay in the USA. America didn't only acknowledge the problem on the ground, but for the first time, America changed her perception of what is going on in the Cameroons. They used to call it an internal crisis, an internal conflict. But right now, it's just no longer an internal conflict, and it is not a civil war either. It is an international war engaging two countries. Like in Europe, a conflict or war between two different countries. That's the most obvious ramification in what America has done in granting to so many people from the Cameroons the TPS. And this is exactly what is eating deep into the fabric of La République du Cameroon elite now. Going forward, they will no longer pretend peddling the message that the war is over, that peace is in the horizon, and that they are winning. Absolutely not. They will have to actually prove to America within 18 months that they have stopped the killings before they can convince anyone else with that propaganda. What this really means is that the day that America takes up the TPS and begin to repatriate its beneficiaries back to the Cameroons, serve the only moment La République du Cameroon, or anyone else in that matter, can suggest that the war is over, the war is won, and peace is back. As if to compensate for the slam from America, La République du Cameroon resorts to Russia for a military alliance. None of their official media has announced it, but the agreement makes the rounds in the social media. Jeune Afrique news publication has added credibility to the story by running it. Assuming, therefore, as reported, that the alliance was actually signed, the question left on the balance is, what could be the possible ramifications of such an alliance vis-a-vis what America has done in granting the Cameroons TPS? Many Ambazonians want to know, can Russia actually go to bed with Cameroon, in which the French, who oppose Russia's war in Ukraine and whom Russia has attacked in Mali, are the godfathers of Cameroon? Is that possible? Or better still, can France, which does not see eye to eye with Russia with recent events in Mali, allow Cameroon enter into any sort of alliance, agreement, talk less about or talk less of a military pact with Russia? Can the French allow that? The Russians will most likely ship out some dilapidated military hardware to Cameroon in the days to come if the alliance was actually signed. But can Russia actually send her troops to come defend Cameroon against Amazonia? Moscow is stuck in Ukraine, and common sense says they won't do such a thing. But the other problem is that no one should expect America to pick up arms to defend Amazonia against La République du Cameroon. America isn't ready to fight against French interests in this conflict when they remain traditional allies, and when they need each other at this moment, when Russia poses a serious threat to NATO. In my humble opinion, therefore, the fact remains that in spite of this jostling of positions, Amazonia remains just where it was yesterday. Nothing has changed. The playing field remains level. But Amazonia has a slight advantage and a window of opportunity. Amazonia isn't racing for a political transition. Yaoundé does. With a consistent build-up of firepower on the ground, economic sabotage as never before, and every group working in synergy with others, Yaoundé will only in a matter of time cave in. And as they say, no retreat, no surrender. Ladies and gentlemen, that was my talking point. And again, I am now joined by Ambassador Tibor Nagy, who is joining me on the road. Ambassador Tibor Nagy, ladies and gentlemen, again was former Under Secretary for African Affairs under President Trump's administration. Ambassador Nagy, it's such a wonderful privilege to have you back here with me again, sir. Thank you for joining the show.
It's a delight to be with you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you 5 on 5.
Perfect, because I like you said, I'm on the road. I'm up here in the mountains of Pennsylvania, and I'm looking at snow of all things, which you do not have in Texas.
I can believe that almost end of April, it is still snowing out there in the northeast. Here in Texas, it shines 24/7.
It does, and I'll be in Texas in a few weeks. I'm looking forward to coming back to the sunshine.
Wonderful, wonderful. Ambassador, you listen to my monologue, my talking point. Please tell me where I am wrong.
Okay, I'm not going to say that you're wrong, because you said one thing which I agree with very strongly, is that this is a window of opportunity. Let's go back. There is, in my view, no relationship between the temporary protected status and Cameroon signing a military cooperation agreement with Russia. You know, those types of cooperation agreements are negotiated for a long period of time. So that had been in process for, probably months, if not for years. And as far as I know, that is a successor agreement to the one that they signed in 2015. So I think we have to be careful not to call it an alliance, because it's certainly not. I mean, both Russia, the United States, China, France, United Kingdom, they all have military cooperation agreements with a number of countries around the world. So that's one. On the temporary protected status, I agree with you. I think that is very significant. The United States has temporary protected status with about, I think, 13 countries around the world. And it is both a human rights issue, but it's also a political issue, because you and I both know that there are serious problems around the world in much more than just 13 countries. There are serious problems probably in let's say 30, 40, 50 countries. So the fact that there is this temporary protected status I think is very significant. Now, at the same time, the Cameroonians were given temporary protected status. The United States also gave protected status to a number of other countries. And just before Cameroon, the temporary protected status was given to Ukrainians. So, having seen how these things work in Washington, it's the Department of Homeland Security that actually gives the TPS, but it's the Department of State, uh, definitely the National Security Council, and other government agencies which all recommend which countries need to get the TPS. I can well imagine that you know that it's a very sensitive issue, that a lot of people say, well, the world pays attention to Ukraine, but it never pays any attention to Africa. That, there have been great suffering going on in Africa for, a number of years in places like the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And when it happens to Europeans and the world, all of a sudden jumps up and down to do something about it. So I suspect that, looking around the world, the Cameroonian crisis has been talked about in Washington. While it has not been on the front of the policy agenda, it has been there all along. So, smart people said, if we're giving TPS to Ukraine, then we should give it to some other countries that deserve it. So, in that respect, I think Cameroon definitely came to the front of the line. Now, the term you used, window of opportunity, I think is very,
Ambassador,
very.
we will get there, but I would like to ask you. I don't know whether it's the Department of State or the Department of Homeland Security, but what do they consider in granting this temporary status to any country? What are the factors they take into consideration?
Well, the whole idea of temporary protective status is that people who are in the United States from that country, immaterial of their individual immigration status. That means, are they there on a business visa, a visitor visa, a student visa? Are they out of status, i.e., they should no longer be there? Because that they would face suffering going back to their country, that the United States says that these people should not return to their country of origin as long as they face danger. So in this respect, the United States of America was saying that in Cameroon, there are several areas which are presenting danger to a Cameroonian, whether it is the Anglophone crisis or whether it's the crisis in the far north with Boko Haram and ISIS West Africa. So it is not uniquely focused on the Anglophone crisis. It is focused on, a number of crises around Cameroon. And, they end the status, like during my time, I think temporary protective status was ended for Liberians. So, as you said, now there's 18 months, but after 18 months, if there's still problems going on, it can be renewed for another period of time. Does that answer your question?
It does. It does. Now you also were a little bit cautious. I mean, you made a point that people should be cautious in interpreting what they see with this pact between Russia and Cameroon. What were you trying to say? Are you trying to say that people should not think like it means anything because the French, China, the Russian, they have pact with America?
Yeah, well, it's not just that. I mean, the United States of America has security agreements with a number of African countries where we provide training, we do cooperation on coastal security. We can sell certain kinds of military equipment. So it's very important that these kind of agreements do not call them an alliance and think that, in a matter of months, there's going to be Russian troops coming to Cameroon. And as we all know, in Africa especially, Russia has not been using their own armed forces. They have a organization called Wagner, which has been active in the Central African Republic. It is now active in Mali. For a while, they went into Mozambique, where the Mozambican extremists actually defeated them, and they very quickly withdrew. They have been in Sudan. They've been in Libya. So if and that those are not based on a military cooperation agreement. Governments have contracted with Wagner outside of any kind of formal Russian state agreements or anything like that, because the Russian state is very sensitive and tries their best to say that there's no official relationship between Wagner and the Russian Federation.
So, if you were an Amazonian, would you be saying, in spite of this pact or agreement reached between Russia and Cameroon, uh, let's still consult with the Russians and see if any help can come from there?
No, if I was a Southern Cameroonian, or we can call them Southern Cameroonians, Ambazonians, I don't get hooked up in the terminology. I would be looking at this from what your term window of opportunity was, to say to both the Americans, and I would certainly be going to the French and saying, listen, your client, the government of Cameroon, is poking you in the eye by signing a military cooperation agreement with the Russians, especially for France. France and Russia have been waging a huge kind of influence war, especially in the Central African Republic, where the Russians have been going out of their way to try to harm French interests as much as possible. I, all the things you say about the Cameroonian government, one thing I have to say is their timing on this is about as bad as it could get. I mean, as you pointed out, just when Russia is fighting an aggressive imperialistic war against its neighbor Ukraine, that is not the best time for a country to sign a military cooperation agreement with them. But this, I think, gives a tremendous public relations opportunity to Anglophone Southern Cameroonians to use both with Paris, but also in Washington, because Washington at this stage is extremely sensitive to countries that are committing over the top friendly acts with the Russians.
What do you think Washington will be thinking about when they see the Cameroon military signing alliances with Russia?
I'm not in the U.S. government anymore, but I can pretty well predict that people are saying, "What in the world is Cameroon thinking, signing an agreement with Russia, especially at this time?" Even outside of Russia's aggressive war, if a country signs a military cooperation agreement with Russia, Washington certainly pays attention. And to do it at this time, especially, is literally poking a finger in the eye of the United States of America. You can't say it any other way.
Is it right, in my interpretation, that America's perception of what is going on in the Cameroons has essentially changed, because essentially they call it an internal crisis, an internal conflict? I mean, you do not grant temporary protection status to an internal crisis, do you?
Yes, you do. We
Okay.
have done it in Liberia, and we have done it in Sierra Leone. We have done it in South Sudan. South Sudan is one of the countries. We've done it in Somalia. Again, Somalia's problem is with Al Shabaab. So most of the time it is with internal crises.
What
Uganda, Ukraine is one of the exceptions if you look on the list, because Ukraine is the one where there's an external war going on. But in Cameroon, both, I mean, you could argue that the Boko Haram crisis is externalized, because much of Boko Haram and ISIS West Africa is centered in Nigeria.
now this TPS uh, privilege extends, I mean, runs for 18 months. When it is 18 months, what is it going to take to convince America that it should be lifted? Or do you think, or is it extendable?
It is absolutely extendable. What happens is when it gets close to the period that it's going to expire, the United States government undertakes a careful analysis of the conditions, and a decision is made in Washington at what we call the interagency level to say, okay, we have the temporary protection status. Should it be let to expire, or are conditions still similar to a Cameroonian having to go back to Cameroon? Will their safety be threatened?
All right. Now let's look at one critical issue involved with this TPS status thing. There is this debate amongst Southern Cameroonians to the effect that often at times these uh, rulings tend to benefit more francophone Cameroonians than they do Ambazonians, Southern Cameroonians, who are actually suffering from the brunt of the war. How does the government, the US government, separate between the two to know exactly who is just an economic immigrant and who is actually running away from war?
Under this temporary protective status, all someone has to be is a Cameroonian. It doesn't matter if they're from, the Central African border, or from Douala, or, any Kusari. It doesn't matter. It applies to all Cameroonians. Cameroonians in the United States, immaterial of their immigration status, do not have to return to Cameroon at this time. And they are guaranteed a period of at least 18 months.
So again, this is about benefiting everybody who comes from Cameroon, no matter where from Cameroon they come from.
Absolutely, absolutely. They have to be very careful. They have to follow the procedures. As with anything else, there's obviously a bureaucratic procedure. There's a form they have to fill in, based on which the U.S. government will determine their exact status, whether they qualify for this or not, and then they're able. Once they're given, once the U.S. government says that they do in fact merit temporary protected status, then they can stay in the U.S. temporarily. They can apply for a work permit. They are protected from deportation, and those types of things. But it is a legal process, and people have to absolutely comply with the regulations.
Can they apply for green cards or refugee
No.
status?
Well, the refugee status is it's outside of this. Temporary protected status is different from refugee status. So for that, I am not an immigration attorney, and I'm not going to give bad immigration advice.
So if the US were to lift this temporary protected status, what would be informing them to do so?
The U.S. would lift the temporary protected. They will review it after 18 months, and in 18 months, if there is peace in Cameroon, if there's peace in the north, if there's peace in the southwest and the northwest, then they will lift the temporary protected status, and every single individual Cameroonian who is in the United States, they will revert to the immigration status that they have individually.
Ambassador, you've written so much about this conflict going on in the Cameroons, and oftentimes you are just as concerned as every Ambazonian that the world isn't paying enough attention to what is going on there compared to Ukraine. I mean, in just about a month, the whole world is about Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine. And Cameroon, in the southern Cameroons, where reports say over 30,000 people have been killed, not much is heard, not much is said from the same powers who now want the world to rise up and stand behind Ukraine. What do you make of this?
Well, you and I have talked about this before. The fact is, African conflicts do not receive the same amount of attention in the global media as conflicts in many other places. Whether it is Myanmar, whether it is Ukraine, You know, that is just how the global media operates. That is why it is incumbent on Cameroonians living in the United States, living in Europe, to engage and publicize their struggles. Because no one, you know, we've talked about this before, right, not right, no one is going to do it for them. I get extremely frustrated when I hear from the Cameroonian community that they are waiting for the international community to solve the problem. And I keep telling people the brutal truth is that the international community is not going to solve the problem.
Well, I guess the message is now settling down amongst most Amazonians because we see what is going on in Ukraine. Now, one of the things that we observed, the world observed in Ukraine, was the discrimination against Africans in particular. When the war broke out, Africans were denied access to the trains and to every transportation system you could imagine to escape the war. Once at Poland, again, they were stopped. They were hindered from entering Poland to secure, I mean, to certain safety. Please watch it. Take a look at this for a moment.
Decades, Ukraine has courted students from Africa as part of the country's tradition of providing affordable higher education to all. Now, Ukrainian universities house more than 76,000 foreign students. That's according to the BBC, with nearly a quarter of them from Africa and more than 20,000 from India. Now, as Russia creeps across the country, thousands of these students have attempted to flee to safety only to be caught in the grips of racism.
We still have people trapped, like in Sumy in Ukraine. There are students, thousands of them trapped because the bridges have been destroyed by bombs and everything, so they can't move. They are trapped there. No more food, no more water. So how are they going to feed? How are they going to survive?
Absolutely devastating. Joining me now is Kimberly St. Julian Varnon. She's an expert in the history of Ukraine and Russia, and Alexander Santu-Ora, a student at the State of University of Telecommunications.
All right. Ambassador, it really amazes me. It puzzles me how the world treats Africans the way they do. Not only in Ukraine, you find the war in Amazonia has been going on for 5 years and counting, and the world doesn't care. But the moment Russia throws a bomb into Ukraine, 3 people are killed, and the whole world, the world leaders go amok. The General Assembly of the United Nations is put together. A vote is quickly tabled to vote against Russia, but nothing is done to the conflict in Africa, the conflict in the Amazonia.
Yes, and your point?
And my point is, what did Africa do wrong? Or what is Africa doing wrong?
Africa's not doing anything wrong. What Africa should be doing is really exerting its own influence around the world. For example, in the United States of America, as you well know, we have a very large African American population. It has frustrated me greatly that there is not more focus and influence given to Africa, because we do have such a large African American population, and for them, Africa should be a huge issue. Now, we do have diasporas, as you well know, in the United States that are very active from several African countries. I can point to, for example, the Ethiopian diaspora, which is politically very active. Cameroon diaspora, to a certain extent, in some congressional districts, is very active. But there is not a unified African voice in the United States to push for Africa as a major issue of focus for the United States government on a continent-wide basis, which is very frustrating for those of us, whether we're African or not, who have considered Africa's importance and who recognize the incredible treasures and riches that Africa presents for the world. So, yes, Africa is not treated the same as other parts of the world, but that has to be changed. And the only way it's going to be changed is by the energetic engagement and involvement of those people who really do understand the importance of Africa. Otherwise, this year the racism is so evident in what happened to the students in Ukraine. Next year it's going to be something else. 5 years it's going to be something else. At what point do we put a stop to this once and for all?
Let us go back to this TPS decision by the Biden administration when Tony Blinken was being voted by the Senate for his appointment as the Secretary of State. One of the hot areas he mentioned America would have to pay particular attention was the Cameroons. But this is the first time that they have now taken some symbolic action in this TPS. Isn't there much more that America could be doing to bring this situation to a negotiation other than just the TPS?
But of course, there's a lot more that America could be doing. But we talked about this before. Every day there's 24 hours in the day. There are 200 and some countries in the world. There's only enough attention to be given to so many things. And you have all of these issues lined up. And all of a sudden, Russia attacks Ukraine. So that goes to the very front of the line. Imagine there's a cooking stove with so many pots on there cooking. All of a sudden, you put a huge pot on there and knocks other pots out of the way. That's what I'm saying. To make an issue be at the front of the line, it needs engagement with Congress. It needs constant engagement with the White House. There needs to be ongoing public pressure and a political campaign. Because look around the world, and you and I could go through and probably identify 30, 40, 50, critically important issues of people suffering in various places. So you cannot give attention to all of them. That's why I always try to be brutally honest and truthful when I talk to my friends across the continent to say, no, the United States is not going to fix this unless you apply political pressure, because our entire government is made to respond to political pressure. It's not going to just respond to causes that are just or causes that need justice, because as I said, there's endless list of causes that need justice. What about the poor people in eastern Congo, where you've had 300,000 or 400,000 people die over the last several decades? They get about zero attention. And we can look around the world and find other things. So if you want your issue to receive attention from the United States of America, you have to focus on it and engage on it.
When you talk about pressure, political pressure, I do not imagine what Amazonians haven't done as far as pressure is concerned. What can they do differently from what they have done? I mean, they've knocked doors. They've carried out protest rallies in D.C. They've knocked diplomatic doors in Europe, around.
Well, I'll tell you what they have not done is they have not presented a unified position with one voice from one group, in constantly engaging with members of Congress, with congressional staff in a strategic, focused, targeted campaign. You have different groups, you publish lots and lots of papers, there are lots of words fly around, but there is nothing focused or strategic. You have people that support federation, you have people that support confederation, you have other people that support this, you have other people that support that. Different groups.
But there is a problem, Ambassador. There is a problem. In a problem like this one, you are bound to have different factions that believe in different things. like you mentioned, federation. There is no way we're going to speak the same voice with anybody who believes in a federation. There's no way we're going to speak with the same voice with anybody who still think that we should go back and live with La République du Cameroon. That is the problem, bringing people with different shades of opinion to speak with the same
Yeah,
voice.
but to me, you're not focusing on the important issue, because at the end of the day, whether it's the people who want a federation or the people who want independence, the truth is they want the same thing, in that they want full rights, privileges, human dignity, fair treatment, and equality for the citizens of the Southern Cameroons or the citizens of Ambazonia. The difference is how you get there and how you achieve that. And if there's a proper focus on human rights, as opposed to how you get those human rights, then the groups could speak with one voice, instead of having one delegation show up at the State Department this week and another delegation showing up next week.
Well, let's hope that those of us who believe in a free and independent Ambazonia, who are the overwhelming majority, would speak at least with one voice. As far as federalists and unionists are concerned, I do not see a day in which we speak with one voice, but of course we do believe they have right to their own opinion and they have right to share it. But this is a problem. It is when they speak for federalism or whatever thing other than independent, we simply consider them as Cameroonians, no longer Ambazonians. But let me take you a little bit to something else. The focus, I don't know if you listen to my talking point, I mentioned Cameroon focusing on using America Peace Institute and the Swiss peace to negotiate. We had a conversation recently with somebody from, very, very highly situated in the government in La République du Cameroon, and they have insisted there is no mediation in which the Swiss government is the mediator. They prefer to go with the Swiss peace. They prefer to go with the American Institute for Peace. And when they do this, they are bringing federalists together to build peace for peace capacity building. When the international community says dialogue without preconditions, isn't it exactly what they are trying to do here?
Well, okay, I have to say, I personally think very highly of the U.S. Institute for Peace, and I'm engaged on a project with them related to West Africa. Um, here's the problem. Everybody has to say that they are in accordance and they want peace, because who is it that can say that what they want is war? I mean, that is absurd on the face of it. But if you're sitting there in the position of the Cameroonian government, what better way to confuse international opinion than to pursue lots and lots of different avenues and lots of forum? Because then what you're doing is you're engaging in a process just to engage in a process. This is basically what the Russians have done leading up to the events in Ukraine, where they were having meetings just for the sake of meetings. So here again, I have to say that the Cameroonian community needs to get their act together so that they can be dealing from a position of unity, at least where it comes to the objectives of what they want for the citizens of Southern Cameroon. It would be very powerful if a delegation that represents groups that want a federation, groups that want a confederation, groups that want an independent Ambazonia, to show up together to say, we may disagree on how we want to get there, but this is what we want for the citizens of Southern Cameroon, is their basic human rights, their basic human dignity, to have the same rights and privileges, to be able to use their English language, to have their Anglo-Saxon form of justice, and on and on and on. So I think that there are a lot of these important
Ambassador,
outcomes that we
Ambassador, I
agree on.
think that agreement is there. That agreement is there. But then there is a point you can't walk beyond, the point of the form of state.
Yep, that's right. And at that point, at that point, you guys have to decide which points win. Remember, I always come back to the American Revolution. The great majority of Americans at the time wanted to continue the union with England. The people who wanted independence for the United States of America represented a minority. But the English undertook a series of acts which made it intolerable. And literally, month by month, more people switched from one point of view to the other. From my observation of what's been going on in Cameroon, has been a very similar situation. That the Cameroon government, by its own attitude, ineptness, is driving more and more people into favoring independence. Unfortunately, I have not seen any polls. I have not seen any data. Some people tell me that the great majority want independence. Other people say, oh, no, the great majority still want federation. I have no information on which to base the conclusion.
Well, I really think nobody needs a poll to know that the overwhelming majority of Ambazonians, Southern Cameroonians, they want their own country. They have manifested that in their resilience for the past 5 years, and they are not going to give up. And I think that is proof enough. And again, if anybody ever doubt that Amazonians want their own country, maybe how about a referendum to see where they want to go, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree with you, and as you know, I have said before that Ambazonians are going to end up getting what they want. It may take a long time. There's going to be, maybe incredible suffering, but you cannot put out the flame of liberty. You cannot put out the flame of wanting freedom. And I regret that, other countries don't see that. But, the United States of America worked very, very hard for its independence. It was a full court press. We engaged in England. We engaged in France. We engaged on the battlefield. And at the end of the day, you look what's happened to our country. So, as I said, when you looked at the Vietnam War and you saw the France and the United States aligned against these, Vietnamese unarmed, uneducated peasants, who would have thought that they were the ones who were going to win? It's the will to win. It's the human spirit, which at the end of the day, wins great victories. Look and see what the Ukrainians are doing now.
Ambassador, you speak with a lot of confidence again and again through your tweets that Ambazonian people at the end of the day will win this war. What informs your optimism? Is it the regime in Yaoundé capability to run the country and negotiate, or is it the fortitude of the Ambazonian people?
To me, it's history. That's part of it. Part of it is as you said, the fortitude of the people and their refusal to give up. And unfortunately, part of it all is also on how the Cameroonian government has reacted to all of this. They have not taken it seriously. They have tried to paper over, these issues with what I call Band-Aids for a very sorely bleeding wound. They've come up with a decentralization which has not been serious. They've engaged in processes which, from my point of view, has only been to have a process just for the sake of having a process. So if you have somebody on one side who is not serious and does not understand the fundamentals of the problem, and on the other side you have a very passionate group that is just not going to give up, I think the outcome is clear. The question is, when do we get to that outcome?
What is the connection with history that I just heard you mention?
Well, like I said, I've looked at the Viet Cong in Vietnam. I've looked at other liberation struggles. I've looked at the Cubans. I've looked at our own country, the Americans, where on one side you have an underarmed but a very passionate group that is not going to give up, and you have on the other hand, in many respects, a foreign power that does not understand fully the culture of what's behind the movement.
And that foreign power in this case would be French Cameroon or is it France?
Well, I would say, unfortunately, even with it's in the same country, that in some respects, the Cameroonian government is as clueless as a foreign power would be.
Ambassador, you are an expert here, and we have this situation where you have the Americans on one side, the French on the other side. They are all allies that would not really want to go against each other. But you find this situation in the Cameroons where we believe America would want to step up and say, hey, stop that. But the French are a problem. How can, as a diplomat, as an experienced somebody, how can America go past this, or any other country in that matter that would want to support Ambazonian go past this?
If I was right now a diplomat representing Southern Cameroon, I would certainly follow your advice and use this recent military cooperation between Cameroon and Russia as an opportunity to, both in Paris and in Washington, to say, you consider the government of Cameroon your ally. Look what your ally is doing, signing agreements with somebody who is in the world to make your life miserable. So, this is an opportunity. If the Cameroon community lets this pass up, then I'm sorry.
And how about the French? Do you see any opening, any in-door for Ambazonia to walk up to the French and say, hey, listen, there was Senegambia. Senegambia walked away. They never cut you off. Look at what Russia is trying to do in Cameroon. Look at what they have done in Central Africa. Look at what they have done in Mali. And now, again, they are trying to do something in... Do you think the French will be maybe open to say, let's listen to these Ambazonian people?
Yeah, you just made some great talking points. Give it to your representatives, and especially see what happens in the elections, in the French elections. Because if it goes one way, then that's one set of points. If it goes in the other way, then it's going to be a lot tougher.
Well, Ambassador, thank you so very much for showing up with me again today. I really appreciate it. And by the way, President Trump is really so much in the headlines, and I see him going back to the White House. I hope you get back there. He wants to get there.
We'll see. One never knows what happens. Only God knows, right?
Absolutely.
Take care. All the best. God bless Cameroon as always.
Thank you very much, sir. I really appreciate it. You have a great day, sir.
You too.
Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Tibor Nagy there. I believe you have heard him. You have listened to him, and the choice is your own with what you make with that interview with Ambassador Nagy.